Video games are one of the most unique and expressive forms of art. Games can merge and transcend other platforms to create truly unique experiences that even the most innovative of artists to ever grace this planet couldn't imagine possible. However, video games are also big business. Developers and publishers are fundamentally at the mercy of the bottom line. Video games require a lot of time and incredibly skilled people to make them. This can balloon costs to exorbitant levels. For the most part then, the games that become icons and survive in the long term are the ones that can make the most bank. This is an unfortunate side effect of the late capitalist system that we all live through. Some of the finest work created in this cornucopia of imagination has not been financially successful. Because of this lack of financial success, these titles have been chalked off as failures in the annals of time. However, this is a rather unfair assessment on some games that have pushed boundaries and created unique experiences. I am Kirsten from WhatCulture, and these are 10 gaming flops much better than their reputations. Number 10, Psychonauts. If you ever wondered what you would get if you mixed palaces from Persona 5 with the aesthetic of a Leica film and dialogue fitting of a Mighty Boosh episode, playing Psychonauts might give you a very close look at that reality. Psychonauts' plot is fantastical and marvellous, so much so that this whole segment could easily be taken up with just trying to explain the whole premise. This is paired with incredibly tight 3D platforming, where each level looks and feels unique from the last. Psychonauts was a critical success as well, but the problem was the average punter just didn't care. By 2005, the 3D platformer was a genre that was on the decline. Gone were the lofty days of the 90s, where Spyro and Crash reigned supreme. Video game hardware and players were starting to look for the next big thing. Psychonauts was an amazing game that was treated with apathy over newer and more exciting titles like Devil May Cry 3 and Resident Evil 4. Psychonauts sold fewer than 100,000 units in its first quarter and was chalked off as a failure. Though over time the game would gain cult-like notoriety, this didn't help developer Double Fine recoup the $18 million lost on this production. Number 9, Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil was a game light years ahead of its time. The mix of stealth, fluid combat, photography modes, puzzles, and dynamic set pieces was the precursor for a formula developer Ubisoft would perfect in later games, such as Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. Beyond Good and Evil suffered for its innovation, however. The game was released on the PS2, original Xbox, and GameCube. These consoles had previously brought video game market forward leaps and bounds, both artistically and financially, but were just a bit too weak to handle a game of Beyond Good and Evil's scope. The camera was a nightmare to keep control of, and its open world felt too static, with objectives a bit too obtuse to fully grasp before the lofty days of mission markers we live in today. For these reasons, Beyond Good and Evil tanked financially. The game's bold premise, colourful characters, and innovative gameplay were something that audiences were just not ready for. Beyond Good and Evil was revolutionary. Number 8, Grim Fandango. Grim Fandango is another example of the void between the people in the industry and the average punter. Critics lauded its definitive sense of style, snappy dialogue, and intriguing story. It won plenty of industry awards for its art direction and was even named GameSpot's Game of the Year. The person on the street, however, was not looking for this type of experience anymore. Grim Fandango is a neo-noir point-and-click adventure game. The whole aesthetic, from the 50s attire, bebop soundtrack, and smoke-filled apartments, could have been lifted straight from Kiss Me Deadly, but players were moving away from this genre. The immortal Monkey Island series, which defined the point-and-click genre, debuted 8 years before Grim. Players had seen it all before and were looking to explore new frontiers. Games like Spyro, Half-Life, Banjo-Kazooie, and Ocarina of Time, which all released in the same year, sucked the life out of Grim Fandango. Once again, Grim Fandango found a cult following and is now seen by most as critics saw it 22 years before. Number 7, Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. Not many games have the honour of tanking so hard they almost collapse a state economy, but Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning not only grasps this accolade with both hands, it does so whilst also being a good game. The state of Rhode Island gave an ex-NBA pitcher and 38 Studios head Kurt Schilling $75 million to make Kingdoms of Amalur, with the original idea being to grow an IP into a world of the same complexities and wonders as Blizzard's World of Warcraft. The marketing team behind the game used the money money in interesting ways though. Schilling sought celebrity endorsements from the likes of ex-NWA member and film star Ice Cube. 38 studios were to incorporate a baseball pun, swinging for the fences. They needed to sell 3 million units to break even, after all. Once all was said and done, Kingdoms of Amalur sold 1.2 million units at the 90-day mark. For a game of this financial scale, this was just not good enough, and forever marked the franchise as a failure. Even though some of the mechanics in the RPG, such as the ability to instantly switch character classes, would later appear in smash hits like Divinity: Original Sin. Number 6. Okami. Okami, meaning wolf in Japanese, when released in 2006, finally gave the colossally successful PS2 the last missing piece of the puzzle. A Zelda-like adventure game, Okami gave non-Nintendo fans a chance to enjoy a rich world filled with adventure, smothered in a glorious Edo period-inspired aesthetic that perfectly frames its traditional Japanese setting. Once again, Okami was adored by critics, even winning IGN's Game of the Year in 2006. The same year, an actual Zelda game, Twilight Princess, was released. Okami is a triumph, but was released at a terrible time. Fans of Zelda games would just go into play Twilight Princess on the global mega-hit console Nintendo Wii, whilst non-Nintendo fans were moving towards the HD revolution starting in 2006, with the release of the Xbox 360 and PS3. Okami became lost within the video game conversation in favour of Wii Sports and Bully. If Okami was released a year or two earlier, it would have been a smash hit. Going against a new console cycle and a new Zelda game? Yeah, it didn't stand a chance. Number 5. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem was groundbreaking when released on the GameCube in 2002. The title, originally slated for the glorious, if unpopular, Nintendo 64, was the console's first step towards a more adult audience. Eternal Darkness blends complex game mechanics with a compelling story that is constantly shifting time and location alongside cutting-edge graphics. It was once again adored by critics and regularly features in lists of the best games of all time. But once again, the general population didn't connect with it. It is worth remembering that in 2002, social media didn't exist, and the internet made sounds that would haunt your nightmares. Most players received their gaming news and info from magazines. For the average person who didn't buy these zines, all they had to go off was box art and word of mouth. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem is a nonsense title that means nothing, coupled with the vague box art that doesn't even begin to explain what the game is about. Plus, a mature-rated game on the GameCube, a console people were drawn to for their flagship iconography, was always going to be a hard sell. The final nail that sunk Eternal Darkness to obscurity, however, wouldn't arrive for another 3 years. This nail was Resident Evil 4, a game that took the innovation of Eternal Darkness and marketed it correctly. Number 4. Jade Empire. Back before the capitalist talons of EA started to wreak havoc on their ideologies, BioWare was on the forefront of the Western RPG movement. For a taste of their blend of captivating stories, interesting characters, and well-developed worlds, there is no better example than Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect. But before these two titles changed the completion of video games, BioWare released Jade Empire. Set in mythological China, Jade Empire builds on the narrative and combat ideas of BioWare's previous title, Knights of the Old Republic, and blends it with Chinese influences. From the wuxia-inspired combat to a morality system and a lot of grey, Jade Empire is a delightful blend of traditional RPG elements and cutting-edge combat mechanics, even making the cumbersome original Xbox controller work. Jade Empire didn't sell well though. This could have been for a multitude of reasons. The fact that it was locked to a PC and the original Xbox coming up to the end of its cycle is certainly a contributing factor, but I feel its setting outside of the worlds of sci-fi and fantasy was a bit too ahead of its time. Released now, Jade Empire would be a breath of fresh air against the dry palette of dystopias. Number 3. No More Heroes. No More Heroes is yet another example of a unique premise locked onto the wrong console. The hyper-violent, heavily stylized hack-and-slash game wasn't perfect by any means, but was a welcome break from the Mario Party clones and shovelware that was blighting the motion-controlled Nintendo Wii. But its mature content did put owners off venturing into the world of Santa Destroy with Travis Touchdown. The Wii was a pinnacle of family-friendly. The goofy Miis, the motion controls, and the aforementioned shovelware was all designed for non-gamers. Families would get together and have a bowl on Wii Sports, parents would get fit on Wii Fit, and kids could collect star pieces on the brilliant Mario Galaxy. Those players who were looking for mature, violent content were already playing on the much more powerful Xbox 360s and PS3s, with proper controllers that didn't give you tennis elbow. No More Heroes, with its zany comedy and bold art style, would have been a success if released on these consoles, where the desire for this kind of experience was. But for the majority of Wii players, it was just one bloody step too far. Number 2, Vanquish. What do you get if you mix the directional talents of Shinji Mikami, the man behind Resident Evil 4 and Dino Crisis, and Western RPGs like Mass Effect? The answer comes in the form of 2010's Vanquish. Vanquish was a slick third-person shooter heavily influenced by Western game culture. This is obvious through the title, from the Dharma space station that clearly took visual clues from Mass Effect's Citadel, to the slick third-person cover shooting perfected by Gears of War. Vanquish still kept a lot of Japanese influence also, with score attack elements and the obvious Gundam-inspired enemies. Vanquish was great looking and slick to play, but this didn't correlate into sales. There are arguments that Vanquish's critical failure is due to its lack of identity, but the biggest contributor to Vanquish being lost in the void was a game released in the same year that was Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 was a similar gameplay experience, but whereas Vanquish told a forgettable story, Mass Effect 2 had the suicide mission. Vanquish was a dynamic game that was slaughtered by one of the best games ever made. Number 1, Earthbound. Earthbound, or Mother 2 Geiger Strikes Back if you were in Japan in 1995, is almost the dictionary definition of a cult classic. The JRPG puts you in the role of Ness. Yes, Ness is more than just a Smash character, and his cohort of friends, tackling an array of situations and enemies. These moods can change from apocalyptic destruction to fighting literal piles of sick. The game beautifully balances the silly with the serious to create an iconic game, but in the US it flopped hard. This was down to its marketing campaign. Nintendo spent a lofty $2 million on possibly one of the most ill-advised advertisement campaigns in gaming history. Nintendo advertised Earthbound too heavily around its brilliant but obscure humour. The "This Game Stinks" campaign focused attention onto Earthbound's very 90s toilet humour, which is the perfect foil against its darker moments, but isolated makes Earthbound look crass and without thought. For US consumers, this tainted the JRPG as a throwaway product not worth investing time or energy into. Once again, time has been kind to Earthbound, and Western audiences now hugely appreciate it for what it is. However, if Nintendo didn't bungle this launch, we could have had a Western Mother 3. And that's our list. What do you think of these gaming flops? Leave us a comment below and let us know. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. But for now, I have been Kirsten from WhatCulture, and I will see you in the next video.